Hey guys, I'm Crystal Cherisani. I run the group Instructional Coaches on Call. I thought that I would get on here and do a video kind of explaining a little bit about what we're doing to prepare for the curriculum for next year. This is going to be very informal. I'm not trying to get fancy or do anything too much with it. I just want to kind of share what we're doing and get the conversation going. I think the time is now to start thinking about next year. I think that we've got to start preparing our teachers to start thinking about next year as well. And I just want to share with you what we're doing at my school to help get us there. So I'm going to do a screen share with you. Share screen. There we go. Share. Okay. So this is the presentation. So what I did is I took parts of the presentation that I shared with my teachers and put that in here, but tried to adapt it more to coaches to help you be able to guide your teachers through this process. So this process is called the Standard Mastery Analysis, and it is preparing for planning next year's curriculum. So looking at the why and the what. Here, let me put this into present mode. There we go. Sorry. Okay. So preparing the why and the what. So vertical planning is vital right now. It's vital all the time, obviously. But if you are a school like mine, when distance learning started, it was during March for us when we were sent home, and we did not necessarily have all of our standards covered at this time. And it's hard for us at my school because if we didn't get it covered before March, then there's a good chance that the new material was not covered after we went into distance learning. I'm at a Title I school where, when students go home, they don't necessarily have access to internet or devices to be able to complete new material or tasks that are being given, especially digitally. So, giving out videos, doing a mini lesson on a video or having Zoom lessons are great tools, but in our school system, it didn't necessarily work to where a majority of our kids didn't have access. So we were not able to use that or depend on that for covering any content that was missed. So that's kind of what this process is going to help our teachers to be able to do, is going to be to close those gaps. So it's going to be a way for the teachers to share which standards are covered fully versus those that maybe they only partially got to cover before distance learning began. And then also looking at the standards that were mastered versus those that were maybe partially mastered versus minimally mastered. All right, so looking at this standard mastery analysis chart, this is the chart that we actually used at my school. So it breaks down by standard element, which you can see here. It goes into standard coverage, so this is whether they taught it partially or fully. Looks at assessment scores to determine the mastery of the standards, and then a place for additional comments. So the teachers are going to complete this by reflecting on all data from this year. So kind of thinking about what they did with the students based on the data they've seen this year, assessments given this year. At our school, we are doing it based on the assessment. So we give benchmark assessments, meaning that so whatever standards they teach in the first quarter, they will have an assessment covering those standards. Then the second quarter, they have an assessment that covers all of those standards. And then the third quarter, at that point, they should have most all standards taught. So that assessment is actually cumulative to give them a little bit of information prior to the standardized assessment. So they kind of know standard coverage by that third assessment because it's the last one before they take the milestone in our state. So those are going to be the three assessments that we use. I personally think that in order to give standard mastery levels, summative assessments work best. However, the option to use formative assessments, especially if that's what you have more access to, will also work for this process. Okay, so the process includes, like I just kind of went over, a breakdown of the pacing guide into the coverage level. and looking at assessment data analysis to determine the standard mastery levels. Okay, so step one, I'm going to go kind of through the process now. This is the process of what your teachers will do. So I'm going to kind of probably end up talking like I'm talking to the teachers because that's how I've gone over this process 4 different times now. So that'll kind of be what I go into. So here, this is going to be where the teacher completes the basics of the chart. Teacher, subject, grade, and standard element. So they're breaking down just the basics, getting their chart ready to complete the real process for it. Okay, so step 2, this is going to be where they analyze the pacing guide. So for this step, they will look at their unit guide, their curriculum guide, pacing guide, curriculum map, whichever term you use for it, that shows when each standard is covered. So they will want to look at that and go to March 17th. Pretty much what they're going to want to do is look at everything, all the standards covered prior to whatever date. I say March 17th, that was our day. But they'll look at all the standards covered prior to the date that school was let out for you, and those will be the standards that were fully taught. Any standards that were partially taught, meaning they were not taught before that, will be the ones after the day you started going home. Or there also is the case that maybe they taught some elements of a standard in the beginning, but we're going to get the second part or another element toward the end that would also be a partially taught. So kind of here's a picture. So the presentation that I did for my teachers have videos so they can kind of refer back to and see examples of each step. So this is just a screenshot of the video. But you'll see here you've got the pacing guide to the right, then you've got the standard mastery to the left, and they go through each standard. So looking over here, based on that, RL1 was covered in the first 9 weeks. So it kind of breaks down that way. If you look though, you'll see here RL7. So for RL7 over here, I would probably put partially taught because you see that a part was taught here and then there's other parts that were taught down here. So that would be partially, assuming you didn't make it that far. Next, you're going to determine student mastery level. This part of the process can be kind of complex depending on where you are as a school and what you've done with your data prior to this point. So if you've already done an assessment item analysis, this part's going to be much more simple for you. Or if you are like us and you tested on an online platform. So we use Edulastic to give all of our benchmark assessments. And what that does is it breaks down the data for us into an item analysis. So we can look at the standard of each assessment and it gives us the percentage of students who got it correct or incorrect. So that is very helpful if you're using the online tool. That's going to make this step easy. However, if you have not done an item analysis, that's going to be where you want to start. And it's going to kind of feel like you're backtracking, but the data you're going to get from it is going to be incredibly valuable. So here, you're going to look at each standard. So each question, you're going to want to look at what standard goes with each question when you're doing like an item analysis. So you'll look at the questions that go with RL1. I'm ELA background, so I'm just going to go with that as my example. So RL1, I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to look at the questions. And based on my questions, would I say that students fully mastered it, partially mastered it, or minimally mastered it? And again, that's based on the data. The percentages here, the greater than 80%, 50 to 79, or less than 49, that is your prerogative. You are more than welcome to change those numbers. This is just kind of what our school goes by, but those are, when you're doing this in your school, that can absolutely be changed. So kind of keeping that in mind. If you have not done an assessment item analysis, that's going to be your step 1. That's going to be where you look at all questions on each assessment and break down item by item what students got it correct, which students got it incorrect for the standards, and then you'll come up with your percentages to know the percentage of how many questions were correct for that standard versus incorrect. And you'll need that information to complete your standard level mastery. So once you've got that done, or if you've already done it, or if you're lucky and you've done it on an online platform that gives you that information, you will then move into the standard level mastery. And this is going to be where you determine the mastery level for each standard. Kind of what I said, you're going to look at the standard, Then you're going to kind of look over mastered, fully, minimally, partially. You'll put the X in the box that aligns to it. So I just wanted to kind of show you some tools that we use to help us. So like here's like an online tool. So it's got the standard, looking at the percentage. So looks like on benchmark 1 here, there were 2 questions that went with the standard. So with those 2 questions, you would then average it together to get the overall percentage of that. And then you would do that for each benchmark. So go question. So this is the standard. There are 2 questions that go with the standard, 100%, 100%. So the average is going to be 100. But you would do that for each of them. So then you've got the assessment analysis tool. This is for if you haven't already done an item analysis, this is for that part. And then just the standard mastery chart, kind of looking at it with the benchmarks there. So having 2 options for how you do it. Lastly, on the chart, you'll see here there's a place for additional comments about standard mastery and coverage. To me, this is the part for you to actually get to communicate with that teacher. Put yourself in the next grade levels teacher's shoes and think each standard, what would be helpful for you to know? So maybe for RL1, finding evidence, you taught that in the very beginning, and maybe you wanted to do a big review in the end before the milestone or whatever your standardized test is, but the year was cut short and you didn't get to do that. This is going to be where you'll make note of that. Covered at the beginning of the year, intended to reteach it, didn't get to. Or maybe it's where for distance learning, you gave a lot of assignments and materials that cover that standard. So during distance learning, the students had ample opportunities to practice this standard, but because of lack of getting work returned, I still can't tell a mastery level. Just something like that. Or it could be where you say taught the first part of the standard elements A, B, and C in the first 9 weeks, didn't get to cover D and E in the last 9 weeks before the year ended. Just notes like that, kind of what's going to help them knowing next year which standards you covered, you kind of talked about, and giving them that additional information. Okay, so last, for us, step 5 is to share with administration. But you as the coach or as an administrative team are going to want to set clear expectations on how you want it to be shared. So for us, we wanted the teachers to complete it and then share it with the admin team so that they could then redistribute it to the next grade level teachers. However, it might be where you are, kind of easygoing with that and you just say, okay, when you finish, go ahead and share it with the next grade level teachers. So that's kind of where you're going to want to set what you want ahead of time and make sure you communicate that to your teachers. And then while you're looking at this page, you can kind of see an example of the start of one that's been done. So Miss Example, ELA, 4th grade. RL1, fully taught, fully mastered, no additional comment needed. But then you get to RL2 where it's like determine the theme of a story, drama, or poem. So I got to partially teach this one. It was partially mastered. And then I'm gonna let you know that I did not get to cover all the elements of this standard. I covered theme of stories and poems, but did not get to drama before distance learning began. So what I've done now is I have told next year's teacher for the students that they can maybe review the theme of stories and poems, but they're going to definitely need to teach the theme of drama because I didn't get to it at all. So it kind of lets them know when they're planning their curriculum for next year, the depth of which elements they need to go into. And to me, that's where the comments section is highly valuable. And then again, the last example. Okay, so what now? So once your teachers have received their file from the grade level teachers below them, they're going to start wanting to embed any missed or low mastery level standards into their pacing guides for the next year. And this is especially vital for ELA and math. As we know, they definitely build onto each other. So if they miss something in 4th grade, when they get to 5th grade, if it was a power standard, then they're going to have to review that and make sure they get that concept taught. With that in mind, that's what this process is for. It's going to help them. I've got this breakdown from the grade level below me. I'm going to look which standards were only partially covered. Okay, of those standards, which of those do I need to make sure I hit? That does not mean they have to necessarily cover every single one of them if it's not going to be a power that's going to have a high impact on their curriculum. But I would have that conversation with your teachers and go ahead and plan ahead of time which standards are the priorities. So then they will start planning lessons. If they get this done and they can think about their curriculum guide for next year with these new embedded standards from the grade level before, they can start going ahead and pulling resources and lessons to be able to cover those standards the next year. So just kind of is this to get the ball rolling. All right, so lastly, I want to kind of go over, like, as the coach or the leader, some things for you to remember if you are pushing this process out with your teachers. So one, make sure the staff knows this process is non-evaluative and that honesty is key for success here. This process can be intimidating if you're having to admit that I didn't cover this standard, I didn't cover this standard, the students didn't master this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. It's so easy for teachers to feel like they're going to be judged because those standards were not covered. When in reality, this year is unlike anything we've ever experienced. So it is so important for you to create a culture as you go into this process that we just need you to be honest for the benefit of your students. If the next year teachers know what standards were missed and they know to go ahead and cover those, you are taking advantage of closing potential learning gaps because of standards and content missed. So you cannot let your pride or your worry or fear get in the way of you being truthful in this process to benefit your students. I've seen so much guilt through this process from teachers, admin, coaches. Like, we feel guilty because we miss the kids, and that, like, that alone, weighs on our shoulders. Then we feel like we're not doing enough. We should be doing more, but what more can we do? And this is new for everyone. So don't let this be another area of guilt for teachers or your staff as they go through this process. Let them know this is a safe zone and that we've just got to be honest and help next year's teachers reach these kids. Okay, so two, a big recommendation I have is for you to do a practice trial yourself so that you can easily understand questions and confusion that teachers may come to you with. So, like, for me, when I was creating this process and coming up with what would be most practical and the best way to do things, I actually pulled data reports myself and broke down one of the grade level content areas so that I had done this. And that helped me. So now when the teachers have been contacting me, they're like, well, what about this? I know how to answer it because I've done it myself. So whether it's you pulling data or you making up data, just to kind of play with, I highly recommend you taking advantage of this and doing it yourself before pushing it out with your staff. Three, you really want to sell the value of this process to teachers when you introduce it. So when you're introducing this, make sure you drive home how valuable this process is going to be for the grade level ahead of them, for the students, for them as they get the grade level belows. And it's going to really benefit everybody in the school. And again, drive home how much it's going to benefit the students, because that's why teachers are here. So make sure that you push out the value. Don't make this a hoop. Don't make this something they have to do because it's on their checklist. This has got to be something that they know there is value in. Four, you may want to go ahead and pull any necessary data reports or write out explicit directions for teachers to be able to find the necessary data. That's a big one for me. If you're like me, I like to do stuff for the teachers that is going to make the process easier for them, one, but that's only when I have the means to do it, which I don't always have. So for example, during this process, I don't necessarily have access to everybody's Edulastic scores. So for the ones that I did have access to, I tried to pull them. However, for the rest of them, I typed up, go here, picture, click on this, picture. Like, I typed up very explicit directions so that they knew exactly where to go and what to do. This process already can be kind of intimidating. So if they don't know where to pull data from or what to do to get that data, then they're going to shut down and you're not going to get the full data and responses out of them. Be prepared to give ample time for this process. We gave our teachers 2 weeks, but we also test on an online platform. So the data was already broken down into an item analysis for them. I mean, I still feel like 2 weeks could be okay, but just be mindful that this is not something that you can give them today and expect tomorrow. I feel like you're going to shut them down and you're not going to get valid results from them if you go about it that way. And then set clear sharing expectations. I kind of talked about this earlier, just making sure that they know upfront who's going to share it with the next grade level and who are they sharing it with. Will you disperse it as the coach? Will the admin disperse it, or will the teachers do it themselves? Okay, thank you for watching my presentation. I love this kind of stuff. I think my favorite is getting to guide teachers in curriculum, and especially when it's valuable and they feel that. So if at any point you're going through this, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any further questions or need assistance in the process. If you're interested in, I have linked in a free resource that goes into, it gives you the breakdown of the process. It gives you a checklist for the process, and it gives you my notes to the coach or leader. You can plan with that intention and keep those things in mind. And then also, I'm not like doing this to plug it in, but if you are interested, I do sell a bundle on my TPT page that has everything, including the presentations, all the documents we used, every file you saw on here, and it has video guidance and examples for the teachers to see for each step of the way as well. That's if you're interested in it. But no matter what, if you are pushing out this process with your teachers, please, please, please take advantage of having me as a resource. Please email me. My email address is here. My Instagram handle is at the Sparkly Notebook. You can also ask questions in the comments here. I think that a lot of questions you have may be beneficial to others. And then also there's my website there if you're interested in checking that out. I have other data, blog posts, and information on there. So thank you for watching.